Start the session now. I'll give you a brief introduction to our moderator today. Vijay Krishna Rajagopal is the CKO and also the Director of Center for Learning, Leadership and Excellence. Vijay has a master degree in educational management from the University of Western Australia. As an academic over the last 2 decades, he is passionate about building progressive learning organizations that provide students and educators with diverse and relevant learning experiences to help build essential skills, knowledge, positively shape their personalities upon a strong foundation of values and ethics. At CLLE, his vision is to facilitate the development of innovative practices that foster capacity and community building among educators. Welcome, Vijay. The platform is all yours.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nagmani. Good evening, educators, for yet another invigorating talk learning panel discussion series on a topic that is very relevant to all of us. The topic is titled, Now More Than Ever, Advancing Socio-Emotional Learning in Our Classrooms. And as our panelists, we have a dynamic bunch of educators, researchers who have had a lot of experience in the area of socio-emotional learning. So before I get into the panel discussion itself, I would like to give you all a brief introduction of our panelists who are here with us today. Thank you to all the panelists for consenting and being a part of this panel discussion series. I'll begin by introducing Renuka Rautela. Renuka has more than 6 years of professional experience in the areas of science and SEL education, curriculum development, and academic content creation. She has previously worked on analyzing science textbooks and building age-appropriate standards. She has also worked closely with students of middle and high school to create experiential learning modules and alternative assessments. Renuka has a major degree in physics from the Delhi University and a major degree in elementary education from the Tata Institute of Social Sciences. Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai. I saw Mumbai and mountains together and I was wondering, how those two things could be in the same sentence. Mountains are her second home and she loves spending her weekends among them. She is with the UNESCO MGIEP Foundation. Thank you, Renuka, for being a part of this panel discussion. We really appreciate you taking time and being with us today. The next panelist we have is Vrinda. Vrinda is the founder of Center for Socio-Emotional Learning. She's an alumnus of the Harvard Graduate School of Education and is a Gandhi Fellowship holder. She has rich ground experience in building positive school cultures. Vrinda has been in the field of education since 2010. She has worked with underserved communities in urban Delhi slums through her project Chehal, and then she has served in rural Rajasthan through Kaivalya Education Foundation, post which she became keenly interested in understanding how learning processes in schools might nurture the holistic development of children. After graduating from the Harvard Graduate School of Education with an M.Ed in Human Development Psychology, she has been working with various stakeholders in the field of instructional design, particularly self-directed personalized learning that builds cognitive skills and socio-emotional skills in the K-12 space. We're really fortunate to have Vrinda with us, who has such a vast experience, especially in the K-12 space. Thank you so much, Vrinda, for being a part of today's panel discussion. We also have with us Pavithra KL. She is the Associate Director, Innovations Lab at the Dream a Dream Foundation. Pavithra joined Dream a Dream's life skill program as a young adolescent girl. She was part of the mentoring program and other life skills initiatives. At the age of 16, she joined as an intern and has grown within Dream a Dream since then. Pavithra is passionate about working with young people and believes in creating the support systems for young people that she didn't have access to. She completed her graduation in commerce from the Bangalore University while working with Dream a Dream. A multitasker, she has donned different roles across projects and has proven her ability to adapt herself to a challenging work environment. Currently, she works as the Associate Director, Innovation Labs, where she is responsible for ensuring and engaging with over 10,000 young people, along with a 50+ member team, developing various skill development modules for young people. Her mission is to work with young people and transform their lives using the life skills approach. Pavithra also works as a lead facilitator, training teachers and community workers across Karnataka as a part of her repertoire of skills that she possesses. Thank you so much, Pavithra, for also consenting and being a part of this interesting topic, something that is dear to all the three of you. So, as we step into the topic, it's customary that we establish a common language so that all of us are talking about socio-emotional learning using the same parlance, and we are able to convey that common understanding to all our attendees. I would also like to congratulate all the attendees for finding time yet again on a Thursday, despite their busy schedules. So I just wanted to pose this fundamental question to all the three panelists. What is socio-emotional learning? I would be happy if either of you want to take the question first. So if we can arrive at a common language of what socio-emotional learning is all about, that would set the pace for the rest of the conversation. Renuka, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I can. Thank you, Vijay. Thank you for that question. And let me start by what I understand of SEL. So, and I'm going to try making it as simple as possible for our audience here. So for me, socio-emotional learning is a process which everybody needs. So we're talking about all ages and all stages. That's, I think, one thing that we want to take away. We're talking about a process through which we build certain knowledge, certain behaviors, certain attitudes, certain competencies that help us understand and respect ourselves as well as the people around us and the larger ecosystem and the larger community. So when I talk about these processes and we talk about what these processes might look like, or what are the things you might want to focus on? So it could be related to understanding your emotions better, right? Respecting your emotions in the moment that they arise. Trying to navigate them if they are complex and challenging. It could also look like being mindfully present to each other. For example, right now, when all of us are present in this session, so being mindful of each other, being mindful to the voices, to the opinions, and just everybody here, that could be another way of looking at SEL. For me, it's also a beautiful way to develop relationships. So I'm talking about deep and meaningful relationships. So what are the processes that need to be set in to form such meaningful, healthy, deep, impactful relationships? So we're talking about all of that. And what are some of the ways in which, what are some of the knowledges and what are some of the knowledge and attitudes that we all need to be able to take, let's say, informed decisions which are respectful to everybody in the room. So for me, that's how I'm trying to understand SEL, a space where I can respect who I am, where I can respect who you are, and a space where I can see myself as a larger part of the community and really contribute to that. So I'm open and happy to hear what my other fellow panelists feel on that.
So I'll go, just building on what you just mentioned, Renuka. As the title itself says, like more than ever, like the need for social emotional learning, and post-COVID, I keep saying that there's an urgency to understand, what we mean when we say social emotional learning in education sector, and the different terminologies that we use, life skills, 21st century skills, social emotional skills. For me, social emotional skills or life skills are abilities for, adaptive and positive behavior that enable young people to deal with day-to-day challenges that comes in. So that's what I understand when we say social emotional skills, life skills, and 21st century skill. And there is an urgent need for us to incorporate this in the education system. And I look forward to the conversation that we will continue to build on what we mean when we say social emotional learning, and how we the urgency to integrate in everything that we do with young people.
Thank you so much, Renuka and Pavithra. I know that we've been speaking about the generic understanding of what socio-emotional learning would mean and how it applies in a post-COVID context. I would like to draw Vrinda into the conversation here. What exactly do you think must be the understanding that educators must have about socio-emotional learning as it applies to the space of education, be it schools, be it the tertiary segment, so on and so forth? Vrinda, if you'd like to comment.
Right. Thank you, Vijay. I think there are three things to keep in mind as educators. The first is that social emotional learning is happening constantly, whether we pay attention or not. Students, everyone, all human beings are in social situations constantly, right? Whether it's a fight on the playground or a celebration within the classroom, all of these are social situations. So it's constantly happening. The first thing to keep in mind is that if we start to notice the processes and the implicit culture and biases that exist in these daily social situations, we begin to be discerning of what is going on. And that is the first tenet that we need to take care of as educators. The second is that children learn more by watching what's happening in their environment than they do by what they're hearing. So, very simple example. We tell children all the time, you should be honest. Honesty is the best policy. But very many of us, when we get stopped on the road by a police officer, right, a constable, we will ourselves maybe give a little bribe and get out of that situation, right? Now, what do you think children learn out of this? Do you think they learn that honesty is the best policy because that's what they heard? Or is it what they've witnessed? What this essentially means is that the adults in the students' lives have to be very much tuned into their own decisions, their own choices, the reason behind the choices they're making, and aware of the consequences of those choices. And then we can even begin to think about SEL for students. A third thing I would draw attention to is, what do we celebrate in our schools and classrooms? And what do we punish? So most of us grew up in classrooms where first rank kiski aayi, wo hame hamesha malum hota tha. First rank, second rank kiski aayi, because those were the positions that were rewarded. And typically a first rank holder, got the highest number of marks. So accuracy was rewarded in an examination. What if we could also find a way to celebrate and reward perseverance in the classroom? So a child who has been perhaps failing or making the same mistake in mathematics over and over again, but has not yet given up and is seeking support from a teacher or is trying a new strategy, is there a way we could also celebrate, recognize that child? And, just do a weekly shout out in the classroom that, okay, Reena persevered 3 times this week in spite of failing, and she didn't lose her enthusiasm. So very, very implicit celebration and punishment, if we begin to examine this within the classroom, it begins to shift the culture within the classroom.
Yeah, thank you, Vrinda. I mean, when you hear all the different perspectives that are coming out about what socio-emotional learning is, it is quite obvious that it is not a concept that is very easy to grasp, because the manifestation of emotions, whether it is in adults or in children, is going to happen no matter what. And that leads me into the next question. Why is it so important? It is not that socio-emotional learning was absent before the pandemic, but there seems to be an increased awareness and there seems to be an increased urgency in the need to seriously take a look at the socio-emotional learning context within the schools. Why is it so important now, especially in a post-pandemic situation? Anybody could take the question.
I could take a shot at this.
Please.
I think that what the pandemic has revealed to all of us is simply the importance and urgency of addressing students' social and emotional well-being. because as adults, we've become aware of our own social and emotional needs and well-being, right? The pandemic threw us all in extremely uncertain times. Even as adults, we don't do very well with ambiguity, and lockdown, I think, further made us aware of conflicts, whether they were within the home or outside, the anxieties that come up in times of uncertainty. So I think we as adults became more crucially aware of how our own emotional well-being has been affected. And that's simply thrown into light children's well-being, which we could earlier ignore because, syllabus complete karana hai ya math or science zyada important hai.
So I'll build.
Yes, Pavithra.
So I'll build on what Vrinda just mentioned. So the need for social emotional learning among young people existed from really long time. So if I have to give you an example, right, when we work with young people, right, there's one childhood trauma, lack of love and care, nutrition, all lot of this would have affected young people development. It is more in young people who come from difficult background. Plus, there's also past change of world, which leads to young people, being unprepared for life. And this is the uncertainty that we always spoke about it, but we always kept talking to young people about, this is how you should be prepared for uncertainty and crisis. And, pandemic abruptly pushed all of us. And as Vrinda said, I think we as adults recognized the kind of impact that COVID had on us. And then there was this conversation about, parents losing job, how are they managing, and the kind of impact that it had on young people. And this is a trauma that I don't think we would be able to overcome. It will last generation. During COVID, what was, of course, numeracy and literacy is important, but what was needed was life skills to be able to be resilient, to be able to think creatively, to be able to support their parents, right? And so that is what was needed. And there's so many examples. Like if I have to give you an example, during COVID, we did have one young person where both the parents lost job. They literally didn't have, they used to work in a jockey factory. It was abrupt. They didn't pay. They received only payment for 15 days. The only thing that, the entire world, or per se in India, we were all focusing was on news. So there's this young people who kept watching for news. And, during first wave, everybody said, no PPE kits, no mask, make your own mask. A lot of those, things were, trending. And this young people quietly, right, he actually said, I have tailoring machine at home. I will actually teach my parents how to stitch a PPE kit. And he was the first one to even think about stitching PPE kit and distributing it in his community hospitals and clinics, where, their income just doubled. And that is where we need critical thinking and applying all the numeracy and literacy that we have learned. And life skills is crucial. And this uncertainty, I think COVID is an example, but it's always there. What we witnessed was that a crisis at a system level, but when it comes to young people, right, as I said, this one childhood trauma, sometimes it's single parent, and a lot of the difficulties that young people go through in life itself. So life skills is important. And what we should be able to, tell our young people and prepare them is to be a lifelong learner. And learning doesn't stop once we are out of education systems. So that's where social emotional learning will play a crucial role in being able to understand who they are, their own identity, and to be able to make meaningful choices once they start transitioning.
Thank you, Pavithra. Renuka, do you have a point of view? It's true that in times of crisis, indeed, all of these expectations of being competent to handle the crisis gets amplified. Do you have a point of view as to why the spotlight seems to be on socio-emotional learning?
Yeah. So I completely agree, Vijay, with what Vrinda and Pavithra, and I think all of us are trying to shower light to the same place. I work a lot with teachers, and I work a lot on teacher well-being. As of now, that's my area of focus. And in the past, I think ever since the first pandemic and the lockdown, we've had a chance to work with teachers across different places. And if I have to focus largely on the Indian context, we've worked with almost about 5,000, 6,000 teachers. I'm saying only 2020, 2021. And one common voice, and this is the voice that I hear a lot from teachers, is of course the recognition, which Vrinda beautifully put, that seeing yourself in a similar situation of distress and vulnerability actually make them think about how important it is to begin looking at SEL as not only a means to resolve the conflicts that I'm experiencing right now in this immediate moment, but also how I need to really bring it out into my classrooms. For example, I remember there's this one teacher who spoke about, again, something what Pavithra was saying, how a couple of our students, and these are students coming from low income backgrounds, that we're talking about students who are coming from the outskirts in rural India, how a couple of them did not have really means to support themselves through lockdown, and we're talking about parents losing job. Now, in those moments, what as a teacher can I really provide them, right? I can't provide them opportunities like that, but can I provide them with those resilient tools? Can I provide them my supporting voice? Can I be available for them and be available to listen to them? I think that's a recognition which teachers have. I think one more voice which is quite strong is also the entire idea of teacher motivation. So we also saw a little dip in teacher motivation. I think that's a recognition also that we need to bring in on this table, because modalities changed overnight. We were expected to transit completely online Zoom, make it interactive, use God knows how many number of digital tools to ensure that learning is happening. But that also took a toll on our teachers. There was not enough support. Of course, there was no pre-support before to transiting into online, and also there was minimum support during the period as well, but classes had to continue. So they also recognized that, I'm equally at an uncertain position. So I need to think about self-care. I need to focus on my well-being. I need to be there available for myself. What can I do to increase this motivation, enhance this motivation? And that's why I think those conversations again about the urgency of SEL for everyone in the system, not just students, but for teachers, but for school leaders, maybe for the parents and the administration, everything kind of just picked on. And that's why we also have a panel discussion today. And we have some amazing, I can see school principals and teachers who are present in this, because this seems to be like the perfect time to make it more serious and make it part of the systemic conversation.
Indeed, indeed. I'd like to sidestep here for a moment. I know all of you have been talking about the kind of impact the pandemic has had, especially on the lesser privileged. And it's quite pronounced that the kind of hardships that they faced and the coping strategies that they had to come up was something that is indeed spectacular. And some of them have done really well for themselves, and some of them have definitely gone under the bus in the scheme of things. But the other perspective one should also look at is when you are talking to students, when you're talking to educators who come from more privileged, schooling ecosystems, more privileged economic strata. For them, the understanding of what socio-emotional learning vis-a-vis the understanding of socio-emotional learning for those who are lesser privileged may be diametrically at opposite ends. What I know that we are talking of socio-emotional learning in a context where there is a lot of light being thrown on the national education policy, on the expectations that it has for schools across the spectrum. But do you think that educators, teachers, students, parents, the entire stakeholders, do you think they need to develop a greater sense of appreciation of what socio-emotional learning truly is, even if they inhabit the more privileged schooling systems? Do you think that is the need of the hour?
But maybe I can add a little here. I can start on. So I've been an educator for a really long time of my life, working with, I would say, one of the most elite private schools in India. Mm-hmm. A lot of my friends right now are still in the school education space as educators, working again in similar kind of spaces, private school and high-end schools. But the challenges change, but they are same. So maybe we are not talking about both parents losing their job. Okay, but the situations change. For example, I know of a lot of my students, and I'm still connected to them on Instagram thanks to technology. I mean, you're still connected to them in some ways, right? And you understand that their fears are different. So, for example, of course, one is the fact that suddenly these kids are, they're so comfortable in traveling out, okay, traveling, being outside in open spaces. Again, isolated in single room spaces, right? These kids actually need a lot of effort. If I think about the teenager kids that I used to work with, they had a lot of concerns about their relationships. They had concerns about who they really are, identity crisis. What do I want to do when I pass out of this school in 2 more years? All my friends are going to all of these great places. So their questions, their identity crises are slightly different, but they still exist. Now, the spaces that they had to discuss this, right? Again, we're talking about school spaces, we're talking about communities outside, we're talking about friendship circles. They all again vanished. Physical spaces vanished. Of course, digital spaces remain. That's not a question. But they were also at a loss there. Access to such systems was again limited to them. And I can think about kids openly talking about on Instagram about, how they're feeling low today. Okay. And just sharing pictures to keep themselves excited about the day, let the day going in. So I think the challenges remain, and I'm sure people have more to add on here, but they might slightly drift. And I know a lot of conscious teachers who actually, even on Zoom sessions, ensure that students' conversations continued. So they realized that perhaps that's not the best medium, but they still encourage conversations, meaningful conversations. They still encourage talking about, body, in fact, self-image, body image. I think these conversations evolve. And I do want to believe that they will continue to be an active voice in the physical transitions as well. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Renuka. Does Pavithra or Vrinda want to comment on this point?
I'd love to. I really like the example that Renuka shared. And I think for me, it brings up the importance of recognizing that all human beings are looking for authentic expression and connection, right? So whether it is someone from a highly privileged background or someone who doesn't come from privilege, at the core essence, this is what human beings need: authentic expression and connection. And therein, whatever identity crises come up for students, if they're teenagers, like Renuka pointed out, often it is about how can I authentically express myself, in the classroom as perhaps a high achiever. How can I still be part of the peer group that I had in middle school, but now my friends seem to be changing? That might be the sort of concern, a student from privilege is having, while the concerns for students from lesser privilege might be different in their community, but they will still be centered on authentic expression and connection with other human beings. And I think if we can remember that, at the core, these are just human needs for every human being, and then bring in the intersectional lens of, if I am to create curriculum or assessments for this target group, then I have to align to their context, understand their needs versus another group. I think if we can just keep that lens, then we're, as educators, doing our job mostly in the right direction.
Great. It's interesting that you bring up the point of developing a curriculum based on the frame of reference and the kind of ecosystem that you operate in. Most of the times, schools are definitely keen to adopt SEL into their classrooms. Sometimes there are these pre-made curricula that are available to schools in order to incorporate these things. When you are talking about the contextual manner in which it needs to be integrated within curriculum, the first question that I have for all the three of you is, are there any specific competencies that one has to watch out for? If we are talking in terms of implementing SEL in the classroom, are there a list of competencies that one has to look out for as educators?
So I will build here from my own experience of. So I'll build here, you know, considering that I did have an opportunity to facilitate the teacher development program. So in terms of, incorporating social emotional learning or life skills, most of the time it looked as a separate class, but not really, understanding that how do we ensure that we integrate life skills in the way I teach math, in the way I teach science, in the way I teach social to young people. So one, like, how do we do it? What are the skills that as teacher or as educators and facilitator that, we should build? One understanding is that one to, reflect on our role, in 21st century skill, what is the role of a teacher in a classroom, because it's not just about access to information, it's much more than that. The role of teacher and educators is complex now. It is even more with the COVID experience. One invitation to all the teachers and educators is to understand how social emotional development happens, or how life skills development happens in us. So once we understand ourselves is when we would be able to see those changes happening in on the ground, because it's not as easy as 2 + 2 = 4. It requires one to be aligned at a mind and heart level, to be able to build that personal connection, to be able to build that trust with young people, to facilitate. So it is important, one, we experience and understand through a lot of the art-based and experiential activities how this can be implemented with everything that we do with young people, rather than looking at it as 45 minutes I have math class and then we should be heading towards life skills. So it can be integrated. It is like a cream line which can be applied with everything that we do with young people.
Great. So I bring back the question to my earlier point. It's wonderful that Pavithra is talking about the need for teachers to understand themselves, and in order to be able to situate themselves in the context of what socio-emotional learning is for themselves to start with, and then what is the kind of SEL that needs to be imparted to their cohort of students. To Renuka and Vrinda, I would like to ask, are we focusing on specific competencies? It is wonderful to say that teachers need to know, or they need to gaze inward and know more about their own socio-emotional competencies. But when we are trying to put pen on paper and try to evolve or come up with a curriculum, what competencies do you think we must be paying attention to?
Maybe I can start, Vijay, and maybe
Yes,
Vrinda can add later. So, of course, there's a wide range of competencies that we can talk about, right? And I'm just going to share 3 which I believe work and are easier perhaps to even integrate in learning spaces. One, and also are valuable. I'm also trying to say it's like a slow start to SELs. We're just talking about the beginning journey, then I feel that some of these things can be focused on. One I really feel is just plain awareness. Just plain awareness of who I am, what am I thinking, how am I feeling, being able to articulate that. So being mindfully present wherever you are. And this is something which I have intentionally been working for the last 2 years, and I can see that it has impacted every other nuanced part of my life. So I really feel that if we can design learning experiences, curriculum, or just our lifestyles around being aware of ourselves and the other, can be a great place to start. The other competency, which is based on my experience with working with teachers and children, is perspective taking. Right? A lot of our concerns in classroom spaces or concerns around the world, I mean, forget classroom space, we're talking about real world, real people and real challenges, right? It evolves from the place that we don't necessarily understand where is the other person coming from, what are their assumptions, what are their biases, what are the culture and values that they've been nurtured all this while with, right? To open ourselves to that idea that somebody else around the same thing can have a different opinion than me, and it's coming because of variety of reasons, maybe the place that they're coming from, the nurture and the nature, and we can get onto that detail. So I think that really helps. And I've seen transformations in classroom spaces happening because of focus on perspective taking. And I think one more thing which I think becomes all the more valuable in contemporary times is the lens of critical thinking. Like, I think there is no denial that the kind of media pressure that we live in today exposes us to a variety of information or variety of gossip, right? Now, how do we distinguish between what is real and what is not real? How do we begin to believe in what is fact and what is fiction? So just engaging and again designing very simple things around dissociation, researching and scoping can really help us to support our young learners, support ourselves as adults to identify what can be true in this mixed messaging. So I think these are three critical competencies for me: awareness, perspective taking, and critical thinking, which I feel should be part of the system in some way.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Vrinda, I just want to extend what Renuka was talking about. She talked about perspective taking. Now, I believe that perspective taking is critical if you have to have the skill sets to establish positive relationships with others. Now, would you want to comment on how positive relationships can be established in the context of schools? When we speak to educators, especially in the last couple of months since schools have started, every educator would tell you that the chinks in the armor are becoming more visible now. We are beginning to understand that students are having issues, and now we are able to gauge the magnitude of the issues that confront them. So, what is your advice to the educators and the fraternity at large on how positive relationships can be established in the classroom? Of course, using what Renuka just said in terms of taking perspectives. Vrinda, are you there?
I think we just lost her.
Okay. Do you want to comment on it, Renuka, until she comes back? How do we build positive relationships in the classroom?
So I think, Vijay, you actually picked the knack here. Like for me, why I also picked up perspective taking was to be able to lead us to a place where we can really focus on healthy relationships. And of course, the concept of positive relationships, she's already here, is diverse. But I do feel that supporting perspective taking along with many other tools that kids need. For example, while we're interacting and you find there's a difference in opinion, right? How do we resolve that opinion peacefully? And I don't want to necessarily call it conflict resolution, but I'm just saying, how do we come to terms with respecting that who this person is who they are, this is what I am, and we can still coexist mutually. So I think that is a big circle, and I'm going to wait for Vrinda to respond and add on to that.
Vrinda, I hope you heard my question.
I did, and I promptly ran away. No, I'm kidding. I got dropped off. I think Renuka already touched on this great point of conflict resolution in the classroom, which can happen between peers or even student and teacher. I'll share a very quick anecdote from the time that I was a teacher. There was one particular student who just did not like me, and would not do their homework, would not really listen to instructions. And I, after about 2 weeks of this, also started disliking that student. And one of the things that my principal actually coached me on was that children get to know when you don't actually like them. And when you're just doing your perfunctory job of doing the teaching and learning, but you don't actually like them, children actually get to know. And one very simple strategy he told me was, he said, I know that this child is not doing their work, is not listening to instructions, is actively disrupting the class. But for 2 minutes every day for 10 days, talk to the child. Whether it's in the hallway, whether it's on the playground, Don't make it about work. Don't make it about studies. Just, tell him how your weekend was. Ask him how his weekend was. What game does he like to play? Just have a positive interaction for 2 minutes for 10 days. And he called it the 2x10 strategy. And honestly, I thought it was going to be an obstacle. 2-3 दिन मैंने किया. चौथे दिन I was like, okay, I'm really not able to get through to this child. What do I do? What do I do? But I persisted. And I think the beauty of this very small strategy is that the child gets the experience that the teacher cares about me as a person, not just as a student who is supposed to finish some homework, but the teacher actually cares about me and respects me as a person. And that very simple strategy, I think, is one of many that can be used to build a warm relationship between a student and a child. And also, I think that is where I learned that, try and target students' behavior problems if you need to. Don't target the child. And there's a difference between the two.
Vrinda, we lost you for a minute there.
I am sorry. I think I'll just say that it's important to have positive interactions with students that make them feel respected as people.
Mm-hmm.
And if there is a problem with behavior, right, then not to say कि ये बच्चा है ही ऐसा, इसका कुछ नहीं हो सकता, but instead to look at that behavior as one part of the child. Again, this goes a long way in building a warm relationship between teachers and students.
I think it's a fantastic point. I think the writing on the wall is quite clear. And educators increasingly are becoming aware of the fact that engaging in constructive dialogue seems to be the way forward. And the point that Vrinda made in trying to make it personal and trying to make it more appear as if to make it in a manner where the child responds to you in a positive manner seems to be the order of the day. You see, when we are discussing about all these ideas, it brings me to my next question. Not all teachers are naturally inclined to engage in such dialogue. They come from different backgrounds themselves. They come from different perspectives themselves. And they have certain beliefs about what teaching is and what learning is. Now, what would you suggest to the teaching fraternity on how they can make these small changes in the way they make themselves more accessible, the kind of agency that they must demonstrate for students to open up to them and open up to them in a manner where things get resolved at the earliest? Was my question audible? Great. Any recommendations for the teaching fraternity? Pavithra, do you want to?
Yeah. So we do have the teacher development program. Happy to share the resources, which helps the educators or the facilitators to understand how to integrate social emotional learning life skills in classroom. It's a 4-module which is spread over a year. Right, in the first session, a lot of the focus is on self, on the teacher to be able to understand our strength, who we are, and then what is our support system and what is it something that I need to work on. The second session is on understanding the child, because somebody has posted a question around how do we work with special needs young people, and if you look at 30 young people, 30 unique young people, and should we be able to facilitate, track each young person. So the second training is around understanding the child, And when I say understanding the child, we talk about, what we call it as failure to thrive. Sometimes if some young people are responding in a different way, some are not good at academics, some are good at it. Why and what are the reasons, and what are the tools that we can use to facilitate this learning for young people? That's the second. Third session is around how do we incorporate social, emotional, or life skills in everything that we do. And fourth session is around, how do I take this to my classroom and implementation. So that is how we have designed the, teacher development program. I'm happy to share the resource. The second is also the Dream Mentoring program. It is a validation tool which we work with, and a lot of the things that Renuka and Vrinda said, right? How do we ensure that we, build this personal connection, we, build that emotional safety in young people? How do we co-create? How do we ensure that we are also co-learners along with young people, and build that trust so that they're able to open up and say that I am not able to do this and somebody else can do. So it's a Dream Mentoring program. I'm happy to share the resources, which actually helps one to understand the validation tool and how we can use that to initiate conversation with young people. So these are the two resources which I have found useful for anybody who works with young people.
Yeah, thank you, Pavithra. Renuka, do you have some advice and suggestions for the educators?
I will try supporting. I think it's there needs to be recognition that it's, though what Vrinda said, yeah, it's right there everywhere. We are doing SCL in every moment, second of our lives. That holds equally true. But at the same time, what I also want to remind the fraternity is that as you try on and open yourselves to, for example, this session, new tools, what Pavithra said, the new course, please also be prepared that not everything is going to work all the time. So being okay with failure is going to be part of the learning journey. And that's something which I have learned with working with all the teachers that I work with, that the tools that you're suggesting in the course. So we also have a course called SCL for School that I'm happy to share that post link here. It's a self-paced course, not going to talk much about that right now. But what I've also learned is, again, that the voice coming back and saying, it's not working, which is perfectly all right. It works in certain classroom spaces under certain circumstances with some children. And that's the recognition that we need to bring as a fraternity. And we should be okay to go back to our observations, to our reflections, to say, why did this not work? So just, even capturing, and does not have to be always writing. It just could be walk into the staff room, have a conversation with someone and say, this didn't work. I don't know why it didn't. And just figure out what might be another option to that. Also, I feel that there are so many resources available online, right? There are some authentic learning systems, authentic websites, which are dedicated to SCL. Just doing a little browsing through that, you will understand there are certain patterns, there are certain activities which apparently are working. You don't even have to go and read papers and studies. That's a part. I mean, that's a great idea, but if you don't want to start slow, pick something simple, try, test it, replicate it multiple times to confirm that it's working, and then share it with the larger community. I think that's the way. And I think one thing, conversation which is coming back again is be resilient, be perseverant. It's okay. We'll evolve and we'll figure out things that's working for all of us. So I think that's where I want to leave the audience. I'd love to hear what Vrinda wants to say on the same.
I think you covered it.
Vrinda, your voice is a little patchy.
I see. Can you hear me now?
Yes, it's much better.
Okay. I think, Renuka and Pavithra actually covered it.
Okay. I was just looking at the chat box, and we had our senior advisor at CLLE put forth a very important point, which kind of resonates with what Renuka had just said about the need for teachers to engage in reflection. There are times when things work, there are times when it just doesn't. What do you think is the role of reflective practice amongst the educators? How do you think people can engage in profound reflection, especially as it pertains to contextually integrating socio-emotional learning? Reflective practice in the realm of academic competence building is one thing, but how do we extend reflective practice amongst the educators where they are not looking at these things as separate entities? Would you have any thoughts?
Vijay, I can add one thing that we just started doing, and I think it's helping, and that's like really starting this idea of communities of practice. Right? For example, this is one community, and if we can interact with this community is a very enriched community. They understand their school, they understand the context, they understand their students, and there's some great questions which are coming on that, right? If we can create a community of these teachers and create opportunities, meaningful opportunities for these teachers to come in, to talk about, to share, to be vulnerable, to not, and to really create that safe space, I think a lot of valuable inputs come from there. And I find that what comes out of community of practice as independent, instruction designers and practitioners, we really can't bring that. So there is value in that. And if we can nurture such culture in school systems, or maybe, as foundations and institutes, if we can do that, there's a lot that can be driven from that. And of course, reflective practices have their own magic, creating opportunities where many a times, this is what I have felt in the journey, is that we are, as teachers, we're inside the classroom spaces and rushing for the next one, working on our lesson plans. If intentionally we could create, or if there was opportunity for us to just pause for 5 minutes, to just write down how my day was, how my class was, I think there's a lot that we can learn from our own observations, and then take it to the larger community as communities of practice and see what is evolving from then. Take back, practice, learn. So it's like, it's ever going process, and I do see value in it. And if we can create more opportunities, I hope it enriches the system.
Thank you. As an aside, I'm really glad that somebody is quoting Etienne Wenger's work and talking of communities of practice. That's been something that I've been quite buoyant about. Just to extend what Renuka was saying, I mean, communities of practice by its very definition is not something that is mandated. Now, I don't know how open school systems are in allowing for such organic combination of educators to come together. That would be an interesting point to talk about if somebody wants to throw light on how can we make these things more organic? How can we encourage a schooling ecosystem to organically convene on problems that they would want to collectively solve? How do you create that kind of an ecosystem? What is the role of a leader if such ecosystems have to be created? I know we are digressing, but we are digressing for the good. If anybody wants to comment. Because anyway, that was going to be my next question. What do you think should be the role of leaders, academic heads in trying to make sense with whatever we've been discussing so far? So if we could begin the discussion on how can you organically allow for individuals to get together to solve problems that matter to them. Vrinda, Pavithra, Renuka, whoever wants to go first.
In fact, Vijay, that's also the conversation that we are beginning to have with a lot of the work that we do with young people. So especially for leaders in the education department, to look at how we can actually shift the system that influences young people, irrespective of the background that they are coming. So, when we talk about, the system, it includes parents. I think COVID is the time where the conversation was around how do we ensure that parents are also act as the educators. So my invitation to the leaders is to, look at the education ecosystem that influences young people, and how do we ensure that we reimagine the purpose of education in 21st century. And that is where the need for social and emotional integration in everything that we do comes into the picture.
Okay. Vrinda, do you want to comment on?
Yes. So while I was working at Kaivalya Education Foundation, we were in fact directly working with school leaders and principals. Mm-hmm. And one of the things we found most effective was just simply how is the staff meeting being used? right? Every school has at least 2 staff meetings a week. If even 30 minutes a week can be used as a reflective space for teachers, a simple exercise like, I tried out this new idea in my class this week, and I'm evaluating whether it worked or not. And what would I like to start doing? What would I like to stop doing? What would I like to continue doing based on what I observed? Very simple 5-minute reflective activity. If it's done during a staff meeting, where the principal is also doing it, themselves, creates 2 things. One, it creates permission for everyone in the staff to feel that it's okay to make mistakes, and here I'm taking time to learn what worked, what didn't, and what should I change next week. So it creates that permission for everyone. And 2, it creates solidarity. And I think as a school, as a staff, in fact, as any organization, culture between the staff flourishes when there is solidarity. 30 minutes a week.
Fantastic. I think we haven't heard from Renuka yet about this particular aspect of the role that leaders can play in furthering the socio-emotional discussions in the staff rooms. Did she just log out? Renuka, are you there?
I think she's
Yeah,
here.
hi, sorry,
She's
I just got
frozen.
disconnected.
No worries.
Yeah, sorry, Vijay, I'm so sorry. I just got disconnected. Yes. Okay, I think the question is the same, right?
Yes, we're continuing
Yes,
to.
absolutely. Okay. So I did hear what Vrinda was saying a little bit, and I have to agree to that. And one thing that I would like to add there is also this sense of agency. Many a times, at least it's what sometimes been my experience in school spaces, that it's too top level directed. Teachers are not really doing the things that they want always. And I think Vrinda really put that out, that what is really happening in the staff meetings, and that's worth a question to explore. And I think if leaders can trust their teachers and give them an agency to run something as magnanimous and as powerful as a COP, I think that's a great place to start. And communicating agency and trust is a prolonged process. You can't just say start one day that let's start a community of practice. I think teachers need to believe in this idea. Teachers need to see this. So I think a good place to start is also, can we create opportunities where some of our teachers can be part of something and feel the impact of it? Once you feel that there is an impact, you see that shift in yourself, you feel, okay, that we can maybe explore this, try this with replicate this model. I think those can be good places to start. But again, I feel COPs are led by the group. So we need to think about how can we engage our teachers, how can we trust them, how can we create capacities, can we create opportunities and roles. I think COP in itself requires a full session, honestly. That's how I would look at COPs. But I think just an agency can be a good place to start from, and providing opportunities for people. In fact, can welcome. Okay, my internet is a little unstable, so I'm going to switch off my video. But we do COPs, and I can welcome some of you to attend our COPs. And here, when I'm talking about COP, we also try to focus on what is the need of the system. So, for example, in some school space that you went in, the challenge of the students is about, let's say, absenteeism. Or then the COP needs to be designed around that. So it can't be one size COP all the time. So we have to look at a problem to see what are the possible solutions that we can come up with, try and test them and come back, do that reflection. That reflection needs to continue and come back to inform our practices. So yeah, happy to talk more about COP when we have the right opportunity.
Indeed. I think we are dipping our feet into waters that are a lot deeper, and we need to spend a lot more time if we were to start talking about, COPs and the role of leaders. I think we just have enough time to take a few questions. I think the discussion so far has been indeed expansive, and all of us do understand that it's not an easy topic to grapple with, and there are indeed multiple manifestations. So if I could take some questions that I'm able to see on the screen here, the question that I see here is one where Sunal's asking the panel, when a teacher's role gradually becomes that of a curator, teachers should share power with the students. How far is this relevant in the context of socio-emotional learning? I hope I have been audible and the question was heard. Renuka, were you able to hear the question? I think you're muted.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So he's just trying to understand how can you share power with the students, and how can it be relevant in the context of the socio-emotional learning in the classroom, the context of socio-emotional learning in the classroom.
So I'm of course interpreting the question in certain ways. I'm going to try responding from that lens. So I think for me, the lens of, if I right now I'm not in a classroom space, but if I were in a lens of, if I was still in a classroom space, I think for me, what is powering is giving power to my students. So like this concept of agency, and I want to take it back again, right? If we can create opportunities for students to feel active agents of their learning, whatsoever that learning is you define, right? You're better in ways that you have to curate an experience, but it can be driven by students. And I think that moment, for me, that's the moment when I, as a teacher, am not, spending 80% of time talking. My kids are taking more. Of course, there's going to be a lot of that chaotic noise, which we have to be okay with also, because it's chaotic noise, which is going to lead to something more beautiful, right? And that is the moment where I feel that there is an opportunity for me as a teacher to feel that it's not as, this job is not as taxing and stressful as it can be. So I think that's a moment for me as calmness. I think that's what I will call. I think for students, it's a moment to build relationships, to navigate some really serious complex problems, to collaborate, to all the things, to actually have an understanding of the other person, emotions, navigating that. So I think that's a beautiful space to be in. And if we can create those spaces in most of our classrooms, I think that sharing the power, I think that's what you meant when you said that, we can really share that power, and it's an opportunity for SEL learning also. So I don't know how well I've been able to respond, but I'm trying to make meaning of the question and the circumstance.
Yeah, thank you, Renuka. There is another comment that I see in the chat box by Elizabeth Koshi. She talks about the fact that I'm reading it as she has written it. I feel not enough importance is being given to the role of parents in ensuring sustainable emotional stability in the classroom. It has to be a collaborative effort. Would the panelists want to comment on this? Vrinda seems to be the one likely to jump into the fray.
Just because I 100% agree with it.
Right. So yeah. So what do you think needs to be done if parents have to become more aware of the kind of responsibility that they share in setting the socio-emotional context for their own children?
Well, in an ideal world, we would have communities of practice that included parents.
Mm-hmm.
But there are constraints as to, parents' time, inclination, various things. Having said that, I think the report card is one thing that goes home to every parent. And the report card is a communication tool about the child. Now, if on the report card, we are only communicating about accuracy in an examination, then I think we're doing a disservice in accurately capturing the child's progress, learning, motivations, all of which we actually are aware of when we're in the classroom as teachers. So one very simple way is to maybe redesign the report card.
Great. There is another similar question that talks about the role of parents in promoting socio-emotional learning. I think we've heard from Vrinda about it. Does Pavithra want to comment about the role of parents and how we can help them deal with the socio-emotional issues?
Yes, because one of the reason I mean, like, they are an important stakeholders, because when you look at who young people respond better, there are only two people that children listen to. There's only two people who can influence them. One is the parent, second is the teacher. So they listen to these two stakeholders, and both of them play a bigger role in shaping young people. So for me, parents do play a bigger role. I think apart from just engaging them in giving feedback, looking at the mask card and things like that, I think it's important to have social emotional conversation with parents, so that they are able to recognize and facilitate the same in classroom. And it just does. It is important that there are workshops and trainings which is facilitated, so that they understand the kind of role that they play with young people, because those are the only two people who kids respond better.
Great. I think we have time for a couple of more questions. Nagmani, do we have any other questions that have missed my...
There is one more question which I've received on my WhatsApp. The question is, do you think action research could be a useful method of integrating research and practice in the socio-emotional learning field? This is the question they've asked.
Any takers?
Sure, I think absolutely. In fact, when I was a teacher, I did an action research myself, purely because I was curious to see which of my SEL interventions were working or not, and designed a couple of qualitative assessments that were distributed to 180 students, and they responded. And the crucial bit therein was actually asking students if they liked, let's say, circle time, what was it that they liked about that? And getting students to respond to what features in my intervention actually enabled them to build self-awareness versus what features in my intervention actually hindered them from building self-awareness. So action research, absolutely.
Great.
Yeah, just building on Vrinda, Dream a Dream has several research papers that is also being published on our website. You can actually go and read, but it is more in the context of working with young people who come from difficult background. We do have a life skill assessment scale, which is standardized and published, which works with young people between 8 to 23-year-olds. So there are 4 to 5 research papers which will give in-depth understanding of the social emotional learning and life skills in young people who come from difficult background, and what are the ethos that one can follow to facilitate that learning in young people.
Great. On that note, I think we've covered quite a large area of socio-emotional learning, and one thing that comes out quite clearly is the role of agency. And all of you have pointed to the role of agency, whether it is teacher driven, whether it is leader driven, or whether it is driven by the students themselves. I think there's a lot of understanding that needs to be built, therefore, about our own personalities as educators, and also trying to spend some time with our student fraternity to understand what they really need. And I would like to thank all the panelists for such a wonderful discussion, for taking all these questions and responding with a heavy dose of pragmatism and bringing in all the experience that they have. Thank you so much to Vrinda, to Renuka, and to Pavithra. I hope all the educators who are connected here with us today enjoyed the session as much as I did. Thank you all once again. We will come back next time with one more invigorating session. We will keep all our attendees posted about what that session will be all about. Thank you all. Have a great evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All the question which is there on the chat box will be answered. We will be sending them to the panelists. So kindly do send in if you have any.